Tá fora, capitão.
Tira a calça dele aí.
Que isso, tu vai falar, filha da puta! Tu vai falar, porra!
Violence, police, corruption, social inequality, and even the Pope's visit. All of that happened in Rio de Janeiro back in 1997, and the only ones who could deal with it were a special group trained to solve problems, BOPE, the elite squad. These cops are so tough and incorruptible that they fear nothing. Their symbol is a skull, a warning of what happens when this unit steps into the favelas to take down the drug lords. The movie opens with a quote from social psychology. What really shapes a person's behavior isn't their character, but the situation they're in. Now we're in Rio de Janeiro, 1997, and Captain Nascimento explains that the city has over 700 favelas, all ruled by drug dealers armed to the teeth, with weapons powerful enough to pierce an armored car. He says that to avoid bloodshed, cops and dealers started coexisting peacefully, meaning cops were paid off regularly to look the other way. The real tragedies happened when cops outside that scheme stepped into the favelas. That's what happened with Matias and Nito, two rookie officers who climbed to the upper side of a favela. Up there, Nito pointed his sniper rifle at a police car, looking for a colleague named Fabio. Seconds later, he pulled the trigger and everything went still.
Ei, mané, qual foi?
Nascimento explains that in Rio, anyone who wants to be a cop has three choices: get corrupted, stay silent, or go to war. Matias and Nito chose the same path he once did: go to war. Shocked, Nito realized he had messed up and ran with Matias. Meanwhile, the party below turned into chaos with random gunfire since nobody knew where the shot came from. The two were discovered, attacked, and had to take cover, convinced they only had minutes left before dying, trapped with no way out. But, as Nascimento says, regular cops weren't trained for war. He, however, wasn't just a regular cop, he was BOPE. Minutes later, he rushed in with reinforcements. BOPE only stepped in when regular police failed, which was almost always. Nascimento admits he had been fighting this war for too long and was starting to burn out.
Meu nome é Capitão Nascimento. Eu chefiava a equipe alfa do BOPE. Eu já estava naquela guerra faz tempo e estava começando a ficar cansado dela.
6 months earlier, during a mission, he caught cops handing guns to dealers in exchange for drugs. For Nascimento, anyone who arms criminals is the enemy. He ordered his partner to take out the corrupt police chief involved. Later, at home, he reflected on his growing tension. He wasn't giving his wife enough attention, and their first child was about to be born. That made him consider retirement. Around that time, he crossed paths with two rookies, Nito and Matias. They were bright, sharp, and had good hearts. A few days later, Officer Fabio sent Nito to work in the maintenance sector, where his mission was to make sure every police vehicle was up and running, even though Nito knew nothing about mechanics. He quickly learned from the two mechanics helping him that the replacement parts never actually arrived. Nascimento describes Nito as impulsive, while Matias was the thoughtful one. Meanwhile, Matias was sent to the incident desk to file reports with a couple of officers, but he wasn't satisfied with just that. He managed to get into the best law school in Rio. The problem was, he believed lawyers and cops had the same mission: defend the law. One day, a student named Maria invited him to join her study group, along with her friends Edu and Roberta.
Esse aqui é o Dudu, a Roberta.
Policial do BOPE, parceiro, tem que saber onde pisa.
At BOPE, the commander warned his team that the Pope would visit Rio and planned to sleep at a house inside the Terreno favela. Because of that, the squad had to raid the area night after night to calm things down, even at the risk of death. The Pope had already been to Rio twice and apparently had no idea how bad things were in the favelas. Still, the governor had to guarantee his safety, so he called in BOPE. That night, Matias told Nito he needed to head to the favela for some NGO work. Nito warned him it was dangerous since he was a cop, but Matias assured him that everyone thought he was just a student. At the NGO, Maria greeted him, gave him a tour, and introduced him to Rodriguez, the coordinator. For Matias, getting involved there was inevitable. Maria was pretty, wealthy, and seemed to have good intentions. But Nascimento comments that Matias shouldn't have been there. Seeing friends using drugs meant he had a duty to arrest them, and ignoring it could be seen as covering for them.
Mas já que tava, tinha que dar o flagrante e autuar os maconheiros no artigo 12 da Lei 6368.
Soon, Matias discovered that a boy named Romerito had dropped out of school because of vision problems. Maria said she would talk to his mom and tried to take him up the hill to get glasses, but Matias knew being spotted could mean death. He chose to go home, promising instead to buy glasses for the kid. Nascimento closes the moment by saying, to start an NGO in a favela, you need the approval of the drug lord. In this case, the dealer Baiano was with Rodriguez, and that's exactly where Edu showed up to buy drugs. That was what infuriated Nascimento the most. Edu Edu had every opportunity in life, but still chose that path. Later, Edu brought the drugs to the university library, passing them to another student to resell. Days later, a new BOPE operation was planned. Tired and on edge, Nascimento was once again sent into one of the most dangerous areas of Rio, leading his men into the fight.
Do lado da faculdade, tá cheio de estudante.
Ciente, Carvalho. Já avisei que vai dar merda isso.
At night, he and his team arrived at the spot. Nascimento knew what they were about to do wasn't exactly right, but he needed to make the best choices, especially with his son about to be born. The squad managed to climb up the hill, take down the lookouts, and ordered the others to lie on the ground. Then they arrested Edu, who was also there, blaming him for the deaths of men just for being a consumer. The last lookout was taken to the precinct. Nascimento was so on edge that a teammate had to hold him back. The next day in class, Maria and her group presented the idea that laws are controlled by the powerful, protecting the rich and punishing the poor. The professor asked for an example, and Maria mentioned the police. Irut and Roberta agreed, as did other students who shared their experiences. But when Matias spoke, he said young people were too easily influenced by what they heard. He admitted there was corruption in the police, but also pointed out that there were officers who wanted to do their jobs right. Since no one agreed, he called out Roberta, saying she had drugs and should know that this drags kids into crime, where they end up dead. Something they didn't realize because the media hides it. Everyone went silent.
Morre por causa de maconha e de pó. Tá? Do apartamentinho de vocês, daqui da Zona Sul, não dá pra ver esse tipo de coisa não.
A few hours later, a woman went to Nascimento asking him to recover her son's body after a raid in the favela so she could give him a proper burial since he was her only son. This hit Nascimento hard because he had ordered the boy to be released, knowing the dealers would kill him. Meanwhile, Nito found out that cops were swapping out new car parts without his permission and went to his captain to report it, but the man was also corrupt and told him to handle it himself. Later, Nito discovered that Captain Fabio was taking bribes for protection, which caused conflicts because sometimes another cop would demand money from the same spot. Hours later, Nito reported an attempted bribe by a colleague to the commander, but since he couldn't prove it, the commander dismissed him, making it clear he couldn't go against the system. Time went by and Nascimento went to the hospital feeling unwell, but the doctor told him he was healthy, just extremely stressed.
Tá sob forte estresse. Eu vou te encaminhar para psiquiatria.
Months later, Matias started doing well at the incident desk, pointing out where patrols should go to protect people. The commander ignored his plan and instead called Captain Fabio to explain about 4 bodies that suddenly showed up in the favela. What really happened was that when criminals weren't found, the commander ordered the bodies to be moved somewhere else to avoid problems. BOPE, however, always brought the bodies back to the exact place they were killed. And since they couldn't do that again, the commander told Matias to register that they had been found at the beach, throwing away all his work. Days later, Nascimento asked his chief to retire, but he refused, saying he would need him when the Pope arrived.
Coronel. Capitão, eu preciso do senhor na missão do Papa. Para mim, missão dada é missão cumprida.
That same day, Nito made a plan to get into the favela so he could finally leave the maintenance sector. Soon after, he found Captain Fabio, who was angry because the commander had cut off one of his bribe sources. Fabio said he needed that extra money and explained that, by the commander's orders, every week someone went up to the favela to collect gambling money. Nito suggested they do it and use the money to fix the vehicles, but Fabio gave up once he realized he wouldn't get anything out of it. Even so, Nito and Matias decided to go through with the plan. Matias would collect the money, but before that, Nito sabotaged the motorcycle that Officer Santos used for collections. Hours later, the bike was repaired, but when Santos showed up, he discovered someone had gone in his place. The commander found out, but couldn't call the police because of the money. Nito managed to buy all the missing parts to fix the broken down cars, hoping to finally be transferred.
10 viaturas na rua agora, Matias.
Porque o coronel não ia deixar barato.
Meanwhile, Matias was getting closer and closer to Maria. A few days later, the commander, unable to complain about the theft, decided to take revenge on the officers. He sent Matias to the kitchen and kept Nito in the maintenance sector, believing they were only following Captain Fabio's orders. To punish him, Fabio was sent on a mission in the Babylonia favela, and because of that, Nascimento officially met Nito and Matias. Days later, we see Nascimento even more tense, because every time he thought about his son, he remembered the boy who died in the favela. Imagining how horrible it must be not being able to bury your child. This leads him to organize an operation to recover the body. Fabio tells his men about the mission and says that if everything goes well, they'll make a good profit, but warns them not to tell Nito so he won't ruin the plan. However, the colonel changes everything. He orders Nito to stay in the maintenance sector and sends Fabio along with him and the other cops. Worried, Fabio warns Nito that they might try to kill him. This makes Nito go to Matias to say that the police suspected the plan had been Fabio's idea, and he asks him to come along for backup. Meanwhile, the cops get out out of their car in the middle of a party to meet with a dealer. At that moment, Nito shoots the man, thinking he was pulling a gun on Fabio. The shot sparks chaos. Dealers open fire, killing cops and civilians nearby. Fabio manages to hide just in time. Trapped, the officers call the commander, begging for reinforcements, but he's busy backing a political candidate. The commander quickly contacts BOPE, which sends Nascimento and his team. Nascimento arrives at the favela fast and forces a lookout to reveal where they had buried the boy. The kid passes out, but they splash water on him to wake him. When he still doesn't answer and time is running out, Nascimento orders his execution. Meanwhile, Nito and Matias try to defend themselves from the dealers, who are slowly closing in and trapping the two of them. Moments later, Nascimento reaches Babylonia and orders the regular cops to stay back. He moves forward with his team and starts eliminating the traffickers along the way. They find Nito and Matias and order them to bring the favela's boss down the hill. There, Matias and Nito ask how they can join BOPE. Sometime later, Nascimento is happy because his son is born. He also finds out that he and one of his teammates will be replaced by 2 recruits. As he prepares for the training course, he writes down the names of 3 corrupt cops, including Captain Fabio, who is involved in illegal activities. His partner Renard tells him that the 2 recruits will be the same rookies he rescued on the hill, and that word is, they're really good. Nascimento also warns that anyone who wants to join BOPE can't be involved with friends of dealers. In Matias's case, there was a problem. He wanted to study 2 majors at once and hadn't told Maria the truth. Every time he came back from police duty, he told her he had been traveling. Days later, the boss of Terreno meets with Maria, furious, showing her a news article about the Babylonia raid where Matias and Neto appear carrying the dealer's body. He orders Maria to tell him everything, since he's the one protecting them. Matias and Nito decide to join BOPE, and Fabio also chooses to apply, afraid the colonel would have him killed if he stayed in the police. But, in reality, Nascimento was far more ruthless than the colonel. In July 1997, 2 months before the Pope's visit, the course instructor addresses the recruits, reminding them they're there by choice, and kicks off the special operations training. Humiliation and punishment are part of the welcome ritual, teaching men to handle extreme pressure. Hours later, during the language class, Nascimento notices Matias asleep. He places a grenade in his hand, warning him that if he lets it go, everyone will die. The next day at lunch, Nascimento dumps all the food on the ground and gives them only 10 seconds to eat. Even after they finish, leftovers remain on the floor, which to Nascimento is unacceptable when so many people go hungry while others waste food. He orders Fabio to eat since he hadn't touched anything, but Fabio refuses out of disgust. Seeing this, Nascimento forces all of them to eat the leftovers. Later, after a run, Fabio starts feeling sick from an injury. Nascimento appoints him as sheriff of the unit and orders him to stand and form his team. Then he sends him to fetch a boat at the riverbank, but quickly tells him he'll never succeed because his place is with the crooks. And in this world, they hate corrupt cops. The pressure is too much and Fabio quits, leaving a cross in a secluded area as tradition for those who fail. Over time, only 8 men remain, including Matias and Neto. Later, Matias makes the mistake of going back to his college. Maria meets him with a newspaper exposing his identity, telling him she's been threatened and is now in danger. Furious, she walks away. At night, Nascimento says his replacement will have to be just like him, otherwise he won't give up the job. By the end of the first phase, only 3 candidates remain. Nascimento's partner chooses his own replacement, leaving him with 2 names to decide between, Neto and Matias. He then teaches the 2 recruits how to enter a favela undetected, pressuring the dealers only with their presence without firing shots. Neto moves ahead and reaches the hot zone. When he sees a lookout, he chases after him, disobeying Nascimento's orders, who would never risk losing a man for nothing. Neto manages to return to the group, but Nascimento orders him to take off his uniform, calling him a boy.
Você é moleque!
That night, his wife finds out he has been taking medication to ease the tension. The captain admits it's because he believes he chose the wrong man, but his wife tells him not to give up, that the kid is really good. Nascimento listens to her, while Neto gets a tattoo of the squad's emblem. The next day, he returns to the favela, this time for Operation John Paul II, eliminating every lookout in his path. Meanwhile, Matias runs into Maria's group, captures Edu before leaving, and shows him the glasses he bought for Romerito. He orders Edu to bring the boy to the bottom of the hill the next day to hand them over, or else he'll arrest him because he already knows what Edu does at the university.
Se você não fizer o que eu tô mandando, eu te prendo, entendeu? Traficantezinho de merda.
Hours later, Edu refuses to deliver the packages he usually carries, saying he can't anymore because he's been threatened by the cop. Baiano interrogates him, and Edu admits that Romerito is supposed to meet Matias the next day. Later, Nito arrives at the apartment and tells Matias he has been called to an important interview for his career, but Matias says he can't go because someone has to deliver the glasses to Romerito. Knowing he could lose his chance, Nito asks where to meet the boy. The next day, Nito goes to hand over the glasses. Romerito takes them and begs him to leave quickly, but it's too late. The dealers surround him and open fire, leaving him badly wounded. Baiano realizes he's not the one he was after and panics because once he finds out Nito is BOPE, he knows his death is guaranteed. He decides to leave, but before that, he takes revenge on those who caused the mess.
O baiano sabia que matar homem do BOPE era assinar a própria sentença de morte.
Soon after, the dealers storm the NGO, capturing Roberta and Rodriguez. At that moment, Maria shows up, sees her friends being taken, and runs away. Later, she goes to the hospital to find Matias and runs into Nascimento, who is worried about Nito's condition. When she meets Matias, she tells him the police refuse to help her, that Romerito is safe, but her friends have been kidnapped. Matias tells her it's too late to save them because they were most likely already dead. That night, his words come true, Roberta is executed, and Rodriguez is burned alive. Nascimento comes home filled with rage and orders his wife to never again interfere or ask about his work. And right then, he realizes the tension that haunted him is finally gone. Meanwhile, Baiano packs his things and tells his wife to take their son to her mother's house. The next day, Maria sees on the news that the police found her two friends dead. Days later, Nito's funeral takes place. Captain Nascimento covers the coffin with the BOPE flag, and when he realizes how close Matias was to Neto, he decides to use that feeling to accomplish his mission. Shortly after, Maria offers to help with the investigation, asking him to promise not to hurt the woman involved. The squad finds Baiano's wife and forces her to reveal his location, but when she refuses, they grab another dealer and shoot him in the legs until he confesses. That night, Nascimento discovers that his wife has left him, tired of living that kind of life. The next day, Matias finds the drug buyer and pressures him until he hands over all the packages. Neto's death prevents the Pope from visiting that area, and Matias is given another mission: capture Baiano. During the operation, a young man is caught and forced to reveal Baiano's whereabouts by being suffocated with a plastic bag. When he resists, Nascimento grabs a broomstick and orders the men to pull down his pants, scaring him so badly that he finally confesses. Meanwhile, Baiano grows uneasy because the hill has gone completely silent. Suddenly, a bullet pierces through his window. He runs up to the rooftop but is immediately hit. Nascimento and Matias find him, and realizing he is about to die, Baiano begs them not to shoot him in the face. The captain asks for a rifle and hands it to Matias so he can finish the job. He wanted to see if Matias was worthy of taking his place. Matias aims directly at his face to guarantee a closed casket funeral, and without hesitation pulls the trigger. This is the story of two young men driven by passion to do what's right and uphold the law, and of a man who, by all accounts, lost his family because he loved his job too much. It shows that there are still cops willing to fight crime and corruption, even in some of the harshest places in Latin America, the favelas, and against the rot within the highest ranks of the police itself.